Hello, this is Venkatesh again. Today I bring to you a game which I played just moments ago with an opponent named Alfonso Elef. Um, so my opponent is 1620 rated on chess.com. This is a 5-minute game and I play my traditional Colle line white with white. So let's see how the game progresses. So we reach this standard Pole opening setup where I have two choices. I could either do d takes c5 or d takes e5. There is already a game which I have put up on my playlist where Koltanowski goes for d takes c5 line, and there is a lot of fireworks on that side. In this game, I choose to do d takes e5. So let's see how the game proceeds from here. So d takes e5, knight takes e5, knight takes e5. So after a bunch of exchanges, bishop takes e5, knight to f3. We come to another position which should be familiar to many Cole players. He develops the queen, queen to c7. We capture the knight, queen takes e5. Good part of Colle system for a beginner is that it's easy to get pieces exchanged and to reach a somewhat clear position on the board. Of course, you have to be careful that you don't get outplayed in the late middle game or the end game. So we continue with the queen f3, bishop g4. This gives us an opportunity to exchange the queens. Queen to g3, queen takes g3. Now we have two options once again, take with the h pawn or with the f pawn. The problem with taking with the f pawn is that we leave the e pawn without much defense, so it gets isolated. So to avoid that, we choose h takes g3. Bishop's job is done, so it's back to e6. f3, trying to create a nice pawn structure and tuck our king away to safety. Knight h5, king f2. In a way, the pawn move of uh, f3 is also inviting the knight to make a useless move. Um, and you see that our opponent indeed obliges. So our king goes to f2. It would have gone there anyways. So this knight move was actually not necessary. Moreover, if you see, then there is this bishop eyeing at the h7 square, typical of Cole lines. And once we get a rook here, we have a nice attack from this side. But it's too early to do this kind of an attack right now, because if I get my rook to h1, knight has absolutely no other square but to go back to f6, from where it defends h7 very easily. So there is no point in doing this at the moment. We'll wait for the right moment to execute this plan. So our opponent goes d4. C takes d4. Why not E takes d4? Well, E takes d4 would have also been fine. Just that king loses one more pawn from his defense. So that was the only reason. But then E takes would have opened up the line for the rook as well. So either move looks good to me. So in the game, I went with C takes d4. C takes d4 once again. Now E takes d4 would leave us with another isolated pawn, which we don't want. So instead, we try to get a tempo over the knight. The plan is that if we get a tempo over the knight, we try to push our pawn through till e6. to dislodge the knight. And once the knight gets dislodged, we have a beautiful attack on the king. So that was the plan, but our opponent was smart. He first took with a check. So notice that this is a check, so there's nothing that I can do. I have to take back with the bishop. So bishop takes e3, g6. Okay, so now my opponent has saved himself from the attack on h7. Um, so we go ahead and try to see what else could we do. So now we want to trap this knight. The only square for the knight is f6, and we try to try to take hold of that square. Okay, so f6 is the response, kicking our bishop back. Um, So one move that I considered here was bishop to h6, but I didn't see much follow up there. He is anyway going to move his rook into an attacking line like d8. So rook of d8 is anyway on the card. Why to waste our tempo going here? So that was the thought process. So bishop comes back to e3. Um, the e3 is a good square because from e3 we have a7 being eyed upon, so this rook is tied for now at its place. If, at any time if this moves, we can just go ahead and take a7. As expected, rook f8, and then we go ahead with another attacking move, be4. Bishop to d5, offering an exchange. We'll go ahead with the exchange. In this case, b takes d5 and rook takes d5. I didn't see any better continuation here, so I just went ahead and did it. When I did this, I noticed that my opponent is way low on time, just 5 seconds on his clock to 2 minutes on my clock. This is usually what happens when you land into positions which you are familiar with. Almost till now, I am quite familiar with the positions we have landed into, but from the look of it, it feels as though my opponent is not aware of these lines. So he's been calculating and he's taking his time to ensure that he's not blundering anything away. That gave me this time advantage, and this time advantage is what is going to win the game from here. Although we are sitting pretty nice here with a plus one, almost a plus one on as per the computer's assessment, favoring the white. We go for another exchange. With such a low time, white has no choice but to just take it. But at this position, my opponent lost on time. The problem by taking is, so note that this game is does not this game does not have an increment. It's a 5-0 game. So if he takes, then I take. His rook is tied to the pawn, so rook cannot move. There is no move for the knight either, so the black knight has absolutely no move. Okay, it can go to, it has a backward move, but from here trying to maneuver all the way here to come to an attack doesn't seem like he has much at this position with such a short clock of 5 seconds. Um, so we go ahead and win this game on time. So let me show this game from the beginning. It was a Colle game, traditional line, opening with d4, d5, knight f3, e6, e3, knight f6, bishop d3, c5, c3, knight c6, short castle, bishop to d6, knight bd2, short castle, rook e1, e5, b takes e5, knight takes e5, knight takes e5, bishop takes e5, knight f3, queen c7, knight takes e5, queen takes e5, queen f3, bishop g4, queen to g3, queen takes g3, h takes g3, bishop to e6, f3, knight h5, king f2, d4, c takes d4, c takes d4, rook h1, D takes e3 check, bishop takes e3, g6, bishop to g5, f6, bishop to e3, rook of d8, bishop to e4, bishop to d5, bishop takes d5 check, rook takes d5, rook a d1, and my opponent lost on time here. So if we revise the game, this was a decisive point. Um, after after rook rook f e1, um, I had an option whether to go for uh, d takes c5 or d takes e5. D takes c5 also falls uh, into e4, forking two of my pieces. But although I would have time to take the opponent's bishop, but then this leads to positions which are very aggressive and attacking, whereas d cross e5 leads to position where a bunch of exchanges simplifies the board. So it's a choice between what do you want. If you are an attacking player, which I am for uh, at many times, I would have equally gone for this line and tried to have a dynamic game, a fun-filled, entertaining game. But D takes E5 is also good because after a bunch of cancellations, you get a simpler position to work with. And if your endgame ideas are pretty good, then you have an edge in such short time control games. So after a bunch of exchanges, we reach this position. All right. So now we are into an end game, and the only thing here is to make some plans. So my plan was to go, was to take the king to safety, and then sorry, not here. We take the rook here to attack the h7 square. So that was the plan. My opponent, I should say, did pretty well on his defense, but he ended up burning a lot of time. Um, so this is what happened. Here the computer says e takes d4 is good, and that's probably the best move. But after e takes d4, you should be ready for rook attack on your pawn, and then to save the pawn, you will probably get your bishop out. The game would progress from here like that. Uh, so I didn't want to give my opponent such easy moves to choose from. Instead, I wanted him to think, and that's why I played this move. So notice that at this time he had about a minute and a quarter on his clock, and before taking this, he has to calculate that there is no harm otherwise. Uh, but on this position, my opponent was surprisingly quick to take with a check. Uh, but this also develops my bishop with a tempo, which is pretty nice. So now both my bishops are in dangerous squares, which I like. So it's worth giving a pawn for that position. The game progressed like this, and it ended here with me enjoying a good position. That's all there is for today. I'll keep coming with more such beautiful Colle games on the traditional line. Thanks for watching.